You see, most people stay trapped in lives they hate, not because they lack ambition, but because they are unwilling to destroy the things holding them back, their comfort, their ego, their old identity. That's why in this video, we are going to break down Steve Jobs' darkest power lessons on how destruction is not the end, it's the beginning of creation. You know what destroys more dreams than failure? Comfort. That invisible cage that convinces you that what you have right now is enough, that staying safe is smarter than risking it all. Comfort is dangerous because it whispers to you in a soft voice. It tells you that you don't need to try harder, you don't need to step out, you don't need to change. And if you listen long enough, it will bury your potential alive. When I was younger, I thought success was about building something brilliant and then holding on to it. But what I learned, what I had to learn through pain, is that real growth only comes when you destroy the comfort that surrounds you. Because comfort isn't just a state of life, it's a trap. It makes you stop asking questions. It makes you stop experimenting. It makes you stop creating. When I was fired from Apple, I lost everything. My company, my team, my place in the world. At first, it was humiliating, it was devastating. I felt like I had been ripped out of my own creation. But here's what I discovered in that destruction. In that collapse, I was freed from comfort. Apple had become my safety net, my identity, my shield. Losing it forced me back into the wilderness. And in that wilderness, I became hungry again. That hunger is what gave birth to NXT. That hunger is what brought Pixar to life. That hunger is what eventually led me back to Apple, not as the man I was before, but as someone sharper, clearer, more ruthless about what mattered and what didn't. That never would have happened if I had stayed comfortable. Comfort is seductive. It's warm, it's easy, it's familiar. But the problem is, it never asks anything from you. And because it doesn't ask anything, it doesn't give you anything either. Creation comes from tension, from hunger, from being on the edge of failure. If you're not risking collapse, you're not building anything worth remembering. Think about it. The greatest innovations, the greatest breakthroughs, the greatest art, it never comes from comfort. It comes from pressure. It comes from the people who are willing to step out of their comfort zone and burn the bridge behind them. Edison didn't invent the light bulb sitting comfortably. Musk didn't build rockets staying safe. And I didn't create Apple by playing it secure. Comfort kills ambition. The truth is, most people never create anything extraordinary because they never leave the safety of good enough. They say things like, my job is fine, my life is fine, my dreams are fine, but fine is death, fine is mediocrity disguised as success, fine is the slow poison of comfort. And every second you stay there, your fire dies a little more. When you destroy comfort, you shock yourself awake. You put yourself back in the position where you have to fight, where failure is staring you in the face, and you have no choice but to rise or collapse. That's the place where growth happens. That's the place where invention happens. When I came back to Apple, I looked at the company and I realized something. It was comfortable. Too comfortable. It was bloated with products that didn't matter, filled with noise, stuck in the illusion of safety. Apple wasn't hungry anymore, and that was why it was dying. So I destroyed that comfort. I killed projects. I cut the clutter. I burned down the safety nets. I forced the company back into hunger, back into focus. And from that destruction came the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone. That's what happens when you refuse to let comfort control you. You have to ask yourself, what in your life is keeping you comfortable but small? What habits, what relationships, what routines are giving you just enough satisfaction to stop you from going after what you really want? Because those things, they are your prison. And the walls are padded soft and warm so you won't notice you're locked inside. Destroying comfort doesn't mean destroying your life. It means refusing to accept mediocrity. It means taking the leap before you're ready. It means burning the bridge so you can't run back to safety. It means doing the thing that terrifies you, not because it feels good, but because it forces you to grow. When I stood on stage and said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," it wasn't a slogan, it was a warning. Because the moment you stop being hungry, the moment you start feeling safe, you start dying inside. Comfort is death dressed in disguise. And if you want to build anything great, you must destroy it before it destroys you. The most dangerous enemy you will ever face is not outside of you. It's not the competition, not the critics, not even failure itself. The real enemy lives inside your own mind. It's your ego. That part of you that whispers you already know enough, that you're already great, that you don't need to listen, learn, or change. Ego is what blinds you when the truth is standing right in front of you. I learned this the hard way. When I was young and Apple was growing, I thought I was invincible. I thought every idea I touched would turn into gold. And for a while, it worked. The Macintosh was changing the world, the company was exploding with success, and I thought I was untouchable. But here's the thing about ego. It doesn't just make you blind, it makes you reckless. It made me ignore people I should have listened to, push away voices I should have respected, and believe that my way was the only way. And then reality struck. I was fired from Apple, the very company I helped create. Imagine that. Imagine being thrown out of the very thing that was your life's work. It was humiliating. It shattered me. But looking back, it was the most important thing that ever happened to me, because it killed my ego. It destroyed that version of me, that thought I didn't need anyone else. That thought I had all the answers. That destruction was painful, but it was necessary. You see, ego tricks you into thinking you're building something when in reality, you're just protecting yourself. It makes you defensive. It makes you afraid of being wrong. It makes you chase validation instead of truth. And here's the paradox: the more you chase approval, the less power you actually have, because your entire identity is tied to what other people think. That's not freedom. That's slavery. When you destroy your ego, something changes. You become lighter. You start listening again. You start learning again. You stop caring about being right and start focusing on what's real. The destruction of ego is not about weakness. It's about strength. It's about having the courage to say, I don't know. I need help. I can do better. That's when you start building something authentic. When I was in exile from Apple, I didn't just start new companies like NextT and Pixar. I started rebuilding myself. I had to ask questions I had avoided for years. Why did I fail? Why did people push me away? Why did my vision collapse? And the answer was clear. My ego had blinded me. It had made me deaf to advice, blind to warning signs, and too proud to admit mistakes. That destruction of ego was what gave me the clarity to start again. The irony is that ego makes you feel powerful in the moment, but it's actually your weakness. It's fragile. It cracks the moment someone criticizes you, the moment the world doesn't applaud you, the moment things don't go your way. But when you destroy it, when you strip it down, you become unshakable, because your sense of self is no longer tied to approval or success. It's tied to the truth, to the work, to the mission. Think about it. How many people do you know who are trapped by their ego? They can't admit when they're wrong. They can't accept help. They can't learn from failure. And because of that, they stay stuck. They may look successful on the outside, but inside they're fragile. One rejection, one setback, one failure, and their entire identity crumbles. That's the prison ego builds for you. When I came back to Apple, I was not the same man who had been fired. I was still ambitious, still driven, still demanding, but my ego was no longer the master. I had learned to listen more. I had learned to trust others. I had learned that the vision was bigger than me, bigger than my pride, bigger than my need to be right. And that shift made all the difference. You must ask yourself, are you building your life on truth or on ego? Are you chasing your mission or are you chasing validation? Because if it's the second, it will collapse. It may take years, it may look strong, but eventually ego eats itself alive. And when it does, it leaves nothing behind but emptiness. Destroying ego is not a one-time thing. It's a practice. Every day you have to kill the need for applause, the need to be admired, the need to be right. Every day you have to remind yourself it's not about me. It's about the work, about the mission, about building something that lasts beyond me. That's the only way to create anything that truly matters. Who you are today is not enough for who you need to become tomorrow. That's the truth most people never want to face. They hold on to their identity like it's a lifeline, like it's unchangeable, like it defines them forever. But the reality is this: the version of yourself that got you here cannot take you to where you want to go. To rise, you must sacrifice your old identity. You must burn it down. When I was young, I was obsessed with the idea of being the rebel, the outsider, the visionary college dropout who went against the system. That identity gave me strength in the beginning. It gave me an edge. It made me bold enough to start Apple in a garage, bold enough to take risks most people thought were insane. But over time, that same identity became a prison. I was no longer just a builder of ideas. I became trapped in the image of being Steve Jobs, the genius, the innovator, the one who always had to be right. That mask hardened around me, and eventually it broke me. When I was thrown out of Apple, I had to confront a painful reality. The identity I had built was gone. I was no longer the young visionary at the top of the world. I was a man stripped of his company, stripped of his power, stripped of the story I had told myself about who I was. And in that destruction, I had two choices: cling desperately to a broken identity or sacrifice it and become someone new. I chose to destroy it, and that destruction freed me. It allowed me to start over, not as the myth of Steve Jobs, but as a student again, a learner again, a creator again. That's when NXT was born. That's when Pixar came alive. That's when I discovered that identity is not something you protect. It's something you shed over and over as you evolve. Most people never do this. They define themselves by their past, by their job title, by their failures, by their achievements, by the label society gives them. They say, "This is who I am. This is what I do. This is all I'll ever be." And because of that, they stay stuck. They never grow beyond their own reflection. They never step into the person they were meant to become because they're too attached to the person they used to be. The truth is, if you want to build something extraordinary, you must be willing to sacrifice the identity that no longer serves you. You must let go of who you think you are. That's not easy. It feels like death. It feels like burning your own skin. But that sacrifice is necessary because every great transformation demands a cost. When I returned to Apple years later, I was not the same man who had left. The old version of me, the arrogant, uncompromising, ego-driven visionary, he had been destroyed. In his place was someone leaner, sharper, more focused. I had sacrificed that identity so I could lead in a new way, so I could rebuild Apple into something greater than it had ever been. If I had clung to the old version of myself, I would have failed. The company would have failed. There would be no iMac, no iPod, no iPhone, no future. You have to ask yourself, what identity are you clinging to that is holding you back? Maybe it's the identity of being a failure. Telling yourself you'll never rise because of the mistakes you've made. Maybe it's the identity of being successful enough. Convincing yourself you don't need to risk anything more because you're already comfortable. Maybe it's the identity of the old you, the one who is scared, the one who is insecure, the one who hides from the world. Whatever it is, if you don't sacrifice it, you will never evolve. Sacrificing identity means letting go of the story you've been telling yourself for years. It means killing the voice in your head that says, "This is just who I am." No, who you are is not fixed. Who you are is a choice. And every time you choose to destroy the old identity, you create space for a new one to be born. That's the cycle of reinvention. That's the power of sacrifice. You can't cling to yesterday and expect to build tomorrow. You can't protect the old version of yourself and expect to give birth to something greater. The sacrifice of identity is painful, but it is also liberating. It strips away the illusions, the masks, the labels, until all that's left is raw potential, waiting to be shaped into something new. Destruction is never the end. That's what most people don't understand. They see collapse as failure. They see endings as tragedy. They see breaking down as weakness. But the truth is, destruction is the beginning of something greater. Every death gives birth to a rebirth. Every collapse clears the ground for something new. And if you look closely at your life, you'll see that the moments when everything fell apart were the very same moments that shaped who you became. When Apple was on the edge of bankruptcy, people thought it was over. The company that had once been a symbol of innovation was now dying, bloated with products that no one cared about, drowning in its own noise. And yet I didn't see that collapse as the end. I saw it as the chance for rebirth. The old apple had to die so the new apple could be born. So I tore it down. I cut the unnecessary. I destroyed what was dragging it down. I forced the company to start again, not from comfort, not from illusion, but from hunger. And from that destruction came the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, a rebirth so powerful it didn't just save Apple, it reshaped the entire world. Rebirth is the reward of destruction. It is the phoenix rising from the ashes. But you cannot experience rebirth if you are too afraid to let go of what must die. Most people cling to their old lives, their old habits, their old ways of thinking, even when those things are already killing them. They hold on because it's familiar. They hold on because it feels safe. They hold on because they're terrified of the unknown. But if you don't let the old burn away, the new will never come. Rebirth is not about comfort. It's about chaos. It's about walking into the fire and trusting that you will emerge stronger. When I lost Apple, I thought my life was over. Everything I had built, everything I had worked for, was gone. But in that loss, something unexpected happened. I discovered freedom. I discovered hunger. I discovered the possibility of starting again. Pixar was born from that rebirth. Next, he was born from that rebirth. And eventually, my return to Apple was not just a comeback. It was a resurrection. I was not the same man who had left. Apple was not the same company. Both of us had been destroyed, and both of us had been reborn. Rebirth is not glamorous. It doesn't look pretty while it's happening. It feels like pain. It feels like chaos. It feels like you're lost in the dark with no way forward. But that's what transformation looks like. That's what growth feels like. The seed must crack before it grows. The caterpillar must dissolve into nothing before it becomes a butterfly. The old must die so the new can live. Look at your own life. Think of the moments you thought would break you. Maybe it was a failure. Maybe it was rejection. Maybe it was a loss. At the time, it felt like the end. But looking back, wasn't that the very moment you began to change? Wasn't that the very moment you found a strength you didn't know you had? That's the power of rebirth. It disguises itself as destruction, but it's really creation in disguise. The problem is most people stop in the destruction phase. They get broken and they stay broken. They give up. They surrender. They accept defeat. They never push through to the rebirth. But the ones who rise are the ones who understand that destruction is not final. It's the doorway. They walk through the fire. They endure the pain. They embrace the uncertainty. And on the other side, they find a new self, a stronger self, a self capable of building something greater. When I rebuilt Apple, I didn't bring back the company that had existed before. I built something entirely new. The products, the culture, the vision, it wasn't a continuation, it was a reinvention. Because rebirth is never about going back to what was. It's about creating what has never been. It's about becoming something that could only exist because of the destruction that came before it. You cannot fear destruction because destruction is part of the process. Every collapse, every failure, every breakdown is simply preparing you for the rebirth. The only question is, will you resist it or will you embrace it? Will you cling to the ashes or will you rise from them? So when you hear the words, I must destroy myself to build myself, understand that this is not darkness, it is power. Comfort will hold you prisoner until you burn it away. Ego will blind you until you kill it. Your old identity will chain you until you sacrifice it. And every collapse, every failure, every destruction will open the door to rebirth if you are brave enough to step through it. That was my life. That was Apple's story. That can be your story. Because greatness isn't built by protecting who you are. It's built by destroying what no longer serves you and rebuilding yourself into something stronger, sharper, and unstoppable. The question is not whether you will face destruction. You will. The question is whether you will let it define you, or whether you will use it to be reborn.